Hello, people. How you doing today? Welcome to our show, and we're going to have an interesting conversation about the latest controversy going on with Sammy Gravano. And Very surprised Sammy made the statement he did. James, how you do? And I'm sorry, people. Let me introduce myself first. This is Lee
Mhm.
Cole and the James Proctor Show. And James, how you doing today?
Hey, doing really good. How are you today?
I'm doing good. And I was thinking, even if I don't like somebody and it's a certain person I don't like, and I don't like to ever defend what he's talking about because I just don't like him.
Hmm.
And Right now he's in a controversy with Tony Pizza, and
Hmm.
let's a lot of people on here that come to this show don't know who Tony Pizza is. Okay, Tony Pizza is a homeless man that has a show, and he's known for telling a lot of t- uh, big tales.
Yeah, and he was on I think where people first had heard about him was on the Bad Vegan show on Netflix. So
He
he
was the
had some
homeless
time.
man on the
Yeah,
street in the bad vegan.
yeah, right.
Right. Thank you for that. And so, what I'm going to do is, first of all, okay. So, Sammy Gravano came out and said that he's changed his stories again. He said that he knows Tony Pizza, that he was in prison with Tony Pizza, and that
Right.
Tony Pizza beat somebody up in prison, and he's a tough guy. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to play with Tony. What he said. It's a 1 minute video, real quick. Let me take this down, and then we'll get into this. We'll get into the story. Okay. Okay, here we go. Okay, people, I'm going to play this right here. And I want you to hear this. Okay, here we go.
Tony Pizza, aka Anthony Carano, says he was a mafia enforcer under you and Gotti. Can you please tell people the truth and that he was not? He's the homeless guy you met.
He was homeless, but he did have a little bit of a reputation. He was with a guy who was a May guy, Tony Pep, from what I understand. He was a little bit of a tough guy. I have bumped into him in prison. We didn't talk too much. He had a beef with somebody, gave the guy a tremendous beating. It came to my attention through people, and they wanted to hurt him, and I had said, no, if he's with Tony Pep, leave him the fuck alone. So I knew him a little bit like that. And when I found out he was homeless and I found out it was almost his birthday, I told him, give me an address. I want to send you a birthday card. He gave me an address. I gave him a couple of hundred. And then he opened up.
Tony Pizza.
You're on mute.
What did you think about that statement that he made that he knows Tony Pizza?
Well, I mean, when you look at, he's been asked this a couple of different times, and so the story continues to change, and so for for me, we need, we're going, if we didn't bring this up, then we would be frauds ourselves, because we have been attacking the lies that Sammy Gravano has said, and so this has nothing to do so much with Tony Pizza or anybody else. It's just, again, a story that's not true. And unfortunately, there's 500, he's got what, 500,000 subs, and so now he's making the reputation for a guy that that never happened.
A guy that's on here attacking people viciously,
Right.
saying horrible stuff. He said horrible stuff about my brother. And every once I kind of joke around sometimes with Tony, and I'll put a video up and I'll kid around. But then when you think that this is Sammy Gravano, out of everybody, this is Sammy Gravano, the number 2 guy on here. Michael Francis, Sammy Gravano. Sammy Gravano did this once before. He shouted out a guy, Jimmy Calandra, on his show. It was obvious during that show he did not know Jimmy Calandra.
Right.
The difference between Jimmy Calandra, though, and the difference between Tony Pizza is Jimmy Calandra actually was with the Bath Avenue Boys, and people did know him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and he also did something similar. When he got out of prison, he was talking with John A. Light, and so he said that he would tell. And I think he even admitted that, I'll prop up John A. Light a little bit, tell him he was this tough guy, and I knew him and everything, and it wasn't true that they knew each other, and then, I mean, he obviously, was tough. He was a enforcer type that
Right.
hit people with baseball bats, but it was embellished, is what
Yes.
I'm
And then
saying, and he didn't know.
and then when Sammy decided to flip on it and take it back, John A.
Mhm.
Light turned on him, and now they're in some type of feud. Once again, John A. Light, Sammy Gravano. Sammy Gravano was the underboss of the Gambino family. I don't understand why he gets caught up with these people. But, I got another piece of evidence that's going to prove that Sammy Gravano had no idea who Tony Pizza was.
Right.
And I'm going to put up that evidence, people, because it needs to be put up. And
Yeah, we need history to be correct. That's what we're trying to do.
and you got somebody out here claiming, listen, there's a lot of things that Tony Pizza hides about himself. Did he know Tony Pep? Tony Pizza was in the street. The difference between Jimmy Calandra and Tony Pizza is Tony Pizza was on the street. Jimmy Calandra was in the streets. Would you say that pretty much describes the difference?
Exactly. Right.
And but here I got an email here that I received from Sammy's people back in December 30th of 2021. This is the actual email that was sent to me. And at that time, I was very furious with Tony because he was saying horrible stuff about family members of mine. So what I wanted to do was find out whether he was real. And I contacted and asked Sammy's people if they were real. One time Sammy Gravano called me and he threatened me. He said to me, if you keep doing shows about me, I'm going to put my foot up your butt. And it was a short call. And he goes, you could be on Team Sammy or you could be on those other sides. And I'll never forget that when he said that. I was shocked because to hear his voice on the phone and all of a sudden to know that he's actually watching something you do. And at that time, I only had 2,000 to 3,000 subs. I was much smaller than I am now.
All right.
Okay. But then his people replied to me when I wrote and asked them about whether he was in the street. I'm going to put that up. And this is my actual email that another show put up, but they shouldn't have put it up. So I'm just going to put it up because it's my email and I can do that. Okay. Let's give me one sec. Okay. Now this is from Sammy's support team. It could either be from the woman that works. He has a woman that works for him at his support, or his son Gerard. Gerard has contacted me, and matter of fact, he asked me to take a video down one time. I left it up, but he did ask me to take it down, and Gerard's Sammy's son. Okay, now this is from support. This is Sammy's support right here. After I asked him about Tony, if Tony's real, he says, if you feel this way about Tony, why don't you do the same thing Sammy has done and stop communicating with him? You are given the additional platform to spew false information. I think it's blasphemous that he would speak ill of your brother after you have apparently tried to be nice to him. Cut those ties and report his post if you believe them to be false or inappropriate. Sammy has already created a statement to share. So I don't know that he would be willing to write a whole letter to you about it, but I am including this statement below. We hope this is sufficient for you. I originally asked him to write a letter to me stating that Sammy did not know Tony Pizza. But here's Sammy's statement. This is his original statement on Tony Pizza. I have never met him in person. He originally contacted me on Facebook Messenger. I felt bad for him and befriended him briefly. He became a nuisance, and I haven't talked or responded to him in quite a while. I have no intentions to and wish he'd stop using my name. Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano. That's Sammy's statement on this whole thing. And that statement is from December 30th of 2021. So you're talking a year and a half ago. Now, when you see this statement here, what's that tell you, James?
Well, what it tells me is that he didn't know him until he had contacted him on Facebook Messenger, sometime in 2021.
And he was part of the he was like a fanboy. He was in the Rampers group that was online, and a few of those things. And once
Yeah.
again, nobody knows. Could Tony have known people? Do you think Tony could have known people being on the streets of New York?
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, he ran across, I'm sure, several people, especially where he was at in Manhattan.
And is it possible that maybe he knew Tony Pep?
Yeah, I mean, he could have known him. I mean, those guys had clubs, they had restaurants. They sometimes give people a little money to, do a little work, like clean up or wash cars, that type of stuff. So yeah, I mean, that happens all the time. I
And
mean,
here's
these
one of the
guys don't want to, a lot of these wise guys are, they do feel bad for people on the street, and we'll give them a few bucks.
and here's what I hear, and I heard this from people that know Tony Pep. They knew Tony Pep. They said that he may have been cleaning the social club.
You know,
Tony Pep had his own social club. He may have been cleaning the social club for Tony. Tony may have let him use the couch in the social club, but that's as far as it goes. You know, um, Tony might not like what I'm saying right now, but here's another thing. Let's talk about times. See, he's saying that he knew him in prison. So let's talk about the time Sammy was in prison. Now let's break this
right.
down. Okay. Okay. So why don't you give us an idea of his prison, starting from the very beginning in the 60s?
Yeah, so he was never in prison until 19 until the 90s, but he was arrested in the mid 60s. He had assaulted a police officer, and he ended up getting off with a $500 fine. And then around 1969, an associate had uh, flipped and accused him and another guy of a double murder, but Sammy got off on that. He didn't. He got some bond and was able to stay on the street. In fact, that
And
was
they
kind of when
and they
that was
dropped
when
the
he
charge.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, they dropped charges, and that was when he was went on like a robbery run to get money because he needed money for his attorneys and to fight the case. So him
Right.
and his friend was going out and basically robbing every day. And then in 1970, he was identified as a suspect in a bank robbery. But then this was when he was on record with the Persicos and, with the Colombo family. He wasn't a made guy, just an associate. And so Persico ended up paying a bribe of like $3,000 to get him off of the bank robbery thing. And then again, what we know is that Sammy had to pay Persico back on that, and so that was going up to 1970. Never did any time, and then in the early 80s, he killed a guy named Frank Fiala, and so he had
And
this
explain to
guy.
us who Frank Fialo was.
Yeah, he was a guy that was he had some money, was a flamboyant type person, and so he he wanted to use the Plaza Suite that Sammy owned and have it for a party. And so after the party, Frank said, "Hey, I want to go ahead and buy the Plaza Suite from him." So they made an agreement for a sale, but then apparently Frank and Sammy got into a disagreement, and we know that Frank ends up getting killed outside the Plaza Suite. So
And
I
Sammy
think before
and,
Sammy doing a double cross,
and
didn't
Sammy
really
did,
work about
and
it.
Sammy described that shooting and described
Yeah,
who did it. They shot his
right,
eyes out, and they said that the body had its eyes shot out. Uh,
right.
the guys tried to strong arm Sammy Gravano and got killed for it. It was that.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone knew it in the neighborhood. That's was, everyone thought that Sammy was going to get in a lot of trouble over that. He was, I mean, Big Paul was really ticked off. In fact, Sammy kind of went away for a couple of weeks because he was afraid that Paul was going to have him taken out. And so anyway, it ended up getting dropped because Sammy paid $5,000 to one of the two detectives, that Louis Eppolito, so the guy that gas pipe and them
Right.
were using. So it got squashed, and then in the mid '80s, as a result of that, the IRS knew about the high publicity generated by the incident, and so this triggered an investigation to the sale into Gravano and Fiala's deal. And so Gravano was charged with tax evasion, and so he ended up getting represented by Gerald Shargel and got acquitted.
And that was because of all the money. The IRS got like a red flag because of all the money that they knew was flying between Sammy, Frank Fiala, all this information that was out in the street.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I mean, he never really spent any time in prison. He might have spent a little bit, a few days in, a county jail or something, but he never really had any legal issues were facing real time until he got arrested on December 11th of 1990.
Okay, and explain those dates of where he was. See if we could figure out maybe where Tony could have been in prison with him.
Yeah, so this is all about the Gotti trial, which that's been covered by many of us. And so anyway, Sammy got arrested on December 11th of 1990. Then basically it was November 13th of 91 when Sammy Gravano turned on Gotti. So he decided to flip, and he's sent off to the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. So he's being held there and working with the feds and the FBI to be a witness on the trial against John Gotti and Frankie Loke. And so the trial happens February 12th of 92. Sammy gets on the stand March 2nd. He's on the stand for about 9 days. And then we know April 2nd of 92 that Gotti and Locascio are found guilty. And then in June 23rd, Gotti and Locascio are sentenced to life. And so, Gravano's still up in Quantico, Virginia. And then he does some, what do you call it, where he testifies on a couple of cases for the feds, and he did what he promised. And so on September 26th of 94, Sammy is sentenced to 5 years in prison, but by that time he had already served 4 years. And so by late 94 he's released from prison.
And James, let me ask you a question. So what you're basically saying is, once he flipped on Gotti, there was no reason for him to care about Tony Pepper or anyone else, because he was the most wanted man by all gangsters in America. Would you say that's close?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the only time that he could have really been around, and again, understand when he's there in Quantico, he's not around anyone but agents of the FBI and the federal government. So the only time period that he could have been with Tony Pizza was between December 11th of 1990 and then when he flipped in November 13th of 91.
So do you think that in
11-month period?
Do you think in that room they had John Gotti, they had Sammy Gravano, Tony Pizza was in that room, and Frankie Loke. Do you think that they were all in that room together? I mean, for some reason, Tony, this is the only way it could have happened. The only way he could have possibly met Sammy Gravano was during that period of time, and we know that didn't happen. They're not going to put those guys with anybody. And then on top of that, it could have.
They were like on the 11th floor or something. They were kind of up there,
And then they had the drug charge that pops up, and he gets arrested. And what year? 2000? What was that? 2000?
So what? He got arrested in the XD case on February 25th of 2000, and they held him on $5 million bond, so he can't come up with it. He's in they're in an Arizona county prison, and then finally the next year he pleads guilty to, if you remember, they did both federal and state
Yeah.
drug charges, and then finally he gets sentenced to 20 years in prison on September 7th of 2002, and then he gets sentenced concurrently to 19 years in prison the next month in October of 2002. And so he's sent to ADX Florence, which is Supermax, in October of 2002, and stays in there until, well, he was in, not in Supermax the whole time, but in prison until September 18th of 2017.
So what do you think? Do you think there's a chance that Tony Pizza was on the streets doing so much damage they put him in Florence?
No, and that's the other thing, is that the way also, if there was any evidence that he was had been in prison, let's say a federal, we would find it.
Right.
There's no record of it on in Pacer or any of those places. So, and it doesn't matter which, the two names that he uses.
And you went through Pacer and checked these dates.
Yeah, went through that. He's not in there. The only way the only way I wouldn't have been able to get information if Tony Pizza was a federal confidential informant. That's the only way. So the only way it could be true is if he's a rat. So
yeah, that's the only way it could be true. But Tony,
but I don't see any evidence of that. There's no 302s
yes,
on Tony or any of that.
Exactly. I think this is. Here's what it comes down to: if John Gotti was still alive, all these lies that Sammy is saying, and it could be proved they're lies, and there's been many of them,
Right.
They would probably overturn John Gotti's. Now, I'm not saying John Gotti would be found innocent, because there was many other charges on John Gotti that probably would have been turned over. But Sammy's testimony would have definitely been thrown out.
Yeah.
A lot of guys, because Sammy sent a lot of guys to prison where his testimony was actually needed to put them in prison. They didn't have other stuff in these people. So Sammy put those guys in prison. So what would have happened to those cases? I mean, if these guys were alive, because Sammy lied so much. I mean, since he's been on here, he's been turning stories around. His stories don't match up to his 302s. I mean, he's proven the lie on here hundreds of times. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's totally it. And so that's where I have an issue with it. It's not so much about Tony Pizza as is about, again, because no one really knows Tony, very few, but it's about Sammy Gravano continuing to make up stories and lie about it. And and what I don't understand is, when he first came out, he said he would say the good, the bad, and the ugly about his life. And so, when he first came out, we thought, well, maybe he would tell us. But, you start looking at 302s, you look at the book Underboss, you look at other testimony, you listen to Michael DeLeonardo, you listen to all these people, and they dispute him all the time. And I know Sammy said that anyone that doesn't agree with him or whatever, we could go to Arizona and confronting face to face and have a discussion about it. I'd be willing to do that, but he doesn't really want to do that.
And people, just so you do know, this is Tony Pizza. He has his own show. He's had so many shows taken down for some of the things he has said to people, horrible stuff. And he has, believe it or not, he has a very strong support group around him. But the reality is, the people that are listening to this that support Tony, that's your business if you support him. But please do research. I mean, if you think that, Tony's in heaven right now, because I even think he was shocked, because what happened that day, one guy that had a hard on for Tony and wanted to become the hero and prove that Tony didn't know Sammy, it backfired. It backfired because Sammy said something totally different. But that can be age, people. Sammy's pushing 80. Who knows? Nobody around Tony Pizza paid off Sammy to say that.
No, no, not at all. And that's why, that's where Sammy, I mean, it's not benefiting well by doing these lives. It just seems to me that he is, it's just hurting him. His credibility is making him look either that he's senile or that he's just lying. And he needs to go back to what he was doing if he wants to have any credibility. But he wants to be the don of social media. Now he's not willing to accept any sort of criticism, and so that's a shame on Sammy for that.
Okay, people, and that's going to be it. We're not going to get into this too much. We said we had to say. Okay, and everybody take care. Thank you so much, James. People
thank you.
come to your own conclusions. We put the evidence up there. You guys come to your conclusion. Tell us what you think underneath this video. Please like our channel if you like it, and sub to it. And it's greatly appreciated. We just wanted to throw this up real quick so we can get our spin on this out. Okay.
Thank
James,
you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.